Clare. We're kicking off this morning's show with a story you've been hearing in our news bulletins throughout the morning. There's a call for the government to fund a recovery plan for Clare communities that have hosted large quantities of refugees in recent years. The latest meeting of Clare County Council's Tourism Strategic Policy Committee has heard a call from Lisdoonvarna Fine Gael Councillor Joe Garrihy for the restoration and accommodation of tourism accommodation capacity in the county. The meeting also heard an update from Fáilte Ireland, where it was revealed that the number of tourism beds in Clare contracted to the state has dropped by 60% since 2023. Clare FM's Seán Lyons was at the meeting in Bunratty Folk Park and spoke with Councillor Garrihy about what he's looking for.
This broadcast package on Clare FM is funded by the Local Democracy Reporting Scheme.
My ask was based around the context of the really welcome transition of some hotels in County Clare back into tourism. So my ask was that we plan properly for that and we support it, and we also are cognizant of the national trajectory on that we've been notified that next March the accommodation for people from Ukraine that will be ending, so that will result in other hotels coming back. So what I want is from a tourism perspective, I want us to be planned, to plan a transition and to look and engage intensively with hotel operators. And the Hydro in Lisdoonvarna is reopening next week actually, with John Burke and Jerry Quinn and Frank Minogue up there. So they will need support. The areas that they're in will need support. They'll need promotion. They'll need investment. Bunratty Hotel just up the road from us here today has reopened recently. So the footfall and the value that brings back in to a community. I mean, the exponential value. It's not just the spend on the hotel in the night. We get people to stay in County Clare, spend in the local cafes and the local businesses and in the local experiences that are from surfing and cycling in North Clare and the Burn Smokehouse, all of these places. So if we get people to stay, then we really realise the benefit of tourism much more than is currently.
Do you imagine that all of the operators will get on board with a plan like that, given that you didn't have a very complimentary thing to say about some of them in terms of contracts for Ukrainians and for IPAS?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose my perspective there on that is that obviously people responded in an emergency situation, and I think, we've spoken about this before, you and I don't think you can repeat often enough the credit that's due to the communities in County Clare, and the credit that's due to the people who came in crisis in their lives, and the way it was managed. But I think that the operators have a responsibility too. They have a responsibility to the communities that were part of the hosting and that made people feel so welcome. And I would like to see more from people who have made a lot of money, be it providing good services to people in crisis. But there is another side to it. There is the host community, and there is a phase now that we want to take this from end to end. I think having dealt with crisis across the county and in these areas, it's now going on for 4 or 5 years. I think we need to as this is bottoms out and people either move back or move away or find their own accommodation, or indeed decide to stay and be part of our communities longer term and work and contribute. I think we now need to do the transition piece that I've been calling for a number of years. Is we can't just decide today that something is happening tomorrow, and that was the most thing I was looking for today, is a transition plan.
That kind of plan will require money. Who pays for it?
I think the government certainly have a huge role to play in it, to invest in these places, to make them, to ensure that they're, if you like, in some ways rebranded. Over a prolonged period out of a business, there's a period of marketing and re-establishment, which a lot of people will need to see. We have really courageous and fantastic people that have invested. Take the Hydro Hotel, for example. Take the Bunratty out the road here. We've hotels in Kilkee coming back, in Innis. People are putting their hands in their pockets from a private perspective. In a lot of cases, they're not the people who operated and made a lot of money over the last 5 or 6 years on this. So the area in which they operate, it's not about supporting, painting the rooms at the hotels or redoing the entrance. It's about making sure that the destination, and this is about destination experience development, And it aligns perfectly with the future, a new future for Irish tourism that was published recently by Minister Peter Burke. So I think it's an investment to reap a reward in a short, medium and long term for the country, from the taxes that are paid by the people who come, and the employment is huge. Next week in the Hydro there'll be 50 people employed in a new hotel. So it's not just about hotels, and this isn't just about tourism, it's about people's future.
You brought this forward at a meeting of Clare County Council's Tourism SPC, and indeed we heard one of the council executive there speaking about how there are constraints, financial constraints, resource constraints. So she was asking, what is the ask of them? Is it simply about devising a document, or is there more?
I think we have to develop a cross-directorate approach to this, because it's not just about tourism, it's about investment in sustainable rural communities. From, I suppose, the specific, Clare is a rural county, so you're talking about the whole of County Clare when you're talking about sustainable rural communities. So I think it's across the board. It's about sustainability around tourism, that you're not driving in a bus from Dublin to see the Cliffs of Moher and back in the evening, that you can stay in North Clare or stay in Bunratty or stay in Ennis. But to do that requires cross-department cooperation. There's houses needed to be built for people who will be able to work in those businesses and walk to work. Imagine that. So I think government owe these areas, and they owe County Clare for the role, and a very positive role, in really difficult times. Like, you can't just say, thanks a lot, I've had the dinner and I'm going home. It's nice to stay and contribute, and I think they should be obliged to contribute to a final phase, which you'd call a transition and a recovery phase in some ways, and alongside of that, it doesn't happen overnight. That we have to be hugely respectful and maintain the humanitarian response to the people who came, and not just say we're throwing you out in the morning and we don't care where you go. I think all of this can be on the table with the cross-government departments and working cross-government, because Clare County Council know the things that need to be done. If they are resourced to do it, you have a win-win situation for everybody, and you have a full process that's a flagship for how you respond properly in a crisis, but how you then play your part tangibly in the transition phase.
Chairperson of Clare County Council's Tourism SPC, Ennis and Fianna Fáil Councillor Seán Talty, thanks for speaking with me. There was a broad discussion today about tourism accommodation capacity in Clare, both on foot of a Fáilte Ireland update on it, and a motion, a proposal from Councillor Joe Garrihy, your West Clare MD colleague. First of all, your own thoughts on that discussion. You spoke a little bit about how it pertains to your own area, but what came up for you today during that discussion?
Thanks, Seán. Yeah, I think it was a very useful discussion there. We had the figures from Fáilte Ireland that show, I suppose, that at the peak of the maybe international response, Clare had 30% of their tourism beds taken over by or dedicated to the international migration response. That figure is down now to 11% of our total capacity, versus a national average figure of 5% of capacity. So I suppose we're still carrying an extra burden or an extra weight in Clare, and I suppose the discussion was about how we can continue that transition back to available accommodation for tourism and for tourism businesses. And I suppose the call where we bottomed out on the meeting today was to go back to the various government departments, I suppose, and to seek some kind of a reactivation funding that would enable the Clare County Council and to support, I suppose, private enterprises in delivering and developing confidence in investing back into hotels and back into some of those properties that will become available again. And that we've seen it in Lisdoonvarna currently. We have the John Burke and Jerry Quinn up there, and they've taken a big chance on turning the Hydro back into tourism accommodation. I suppose we need to give that same confidence to other operators throughout the county, whether that's in Bunratty or Ennis or Kilkee or Lisdoon or Ballyvaughan, that the private operators can see that the state is going to encourage and support their return to the tourism piece, because we know that in Clare, the reliance on tourism for the entire county is huge. So that's exponential versus other counties in the country. So when we see they were carrying an extra piece of the Ukrainian response. We now need to see a kind of weighted government support to get out the other side of that.
Obviously, this began as a crisis response to lots of global factors, but does it disappoint you that there doesn't seem to have been much thought given to how this would affect Clare's very tourism-reliant economy in the first place? And indeed, now we're not really hearing ministers or departments talking about how communities that are affected are going to be supported.
Yeah, I suppose there's no point going back over, how this response came about and maybe some of the shortcomings and failures. I think there's great credit due to the communities in Clare, how they carried themselves and how they did respond in a positive way. And I think that was testament to the people of Clare. The challenge now for us to go back to government is to say that, it's grand to say that the beds are just going to suddenly turn back into available for tourism. It's not that simple. It's going to take supports and investments and encouragement to give confidence to the private sector to go back into that traditional tourism accommodation space.
Promotion surely as well, because we know that it was referenced today that certain events aren't taking place now because people have got used to there not being accommodation. Certain tourist cohorts aren't coming to areas of County Clare anymore because they're used to the idea of there not being the beds.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, certain high-level events that were set in the calendar for decades have fell away, and I suppose I know there's good support currently through the council to support events and festivals, and that idea that we need a network of festivals throughout the 12-month calendar knitted across the whole county, to support, to give people attractions and something to come and visit and stay and spend a weekend or a week in our area.
And will you be calling on the Oireachtas members within your own party to pick up this cause?
Yeah, I would think so, yeah. I think across all parties, all our Oireachtas members, I think need to be just trying to explain that case in Clare, that we have a huge reliance on tourism. The impact of the last number of years has been significant, and to return to something of a normality is going to require some bit of coordinated response.